Millionaire's date takes a dark turn when he sees his pregnant ex-wife struggling as a waitress. Victor DeSmet, a renowned CEO and visionary in the technology sector, had it all. A brilliant career, a life of luxury, and a loving wife, Elise, who supported him through his most challenging moments. But pressure and ego led him to make unthinking choices, culminating in a bitter divorce that left deep scars. Elise, pregnant with a child Victor never knew existed, was forced to start again on her own. The restaurant in Bruges was filled with golden lights, its elegant chandeliers reflecting off the polished wooden floors. The soft sound of a piano played in the background, adding to the refined atmosphere. It seemed to mirror Victor's life, impeccable, under control, and full of appearances. He watched Chloe, his new girlfriend, with her charming smile and infectious laugh, as they toasted a new $1 million contract that would guarantee another year of prosperity for his company. But behind that confident smile, Victor felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. Something about the evening bothered him, but he ignored the feeling, as he did with so many other things in his life. As Chloe talked animatedly about a future trip to Paris, Victor looked away for a moment. That's when his eyes caught something that made him freeze. Behind the counter, with her hair tied back in a simple bun and wearing a worn-out uniform, was Elise, his ex-wife. His heart raced, but it wasn't because he was surprised to see her there. It was because of the obvious figure of a round belly beneath her apron. Elise was pregnant. The shock was immediate. Victor felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He tried to look away but couldn't. There was something different about Elise. Despite the dark circles under her eyes and the tired expression, there was a determination in her face that he didn't recognize. She looked stronger, like someone who had learned to survive in chaos. While clearing tables and carrying trays, Elise didn't notice Victor's stare. Chloe, however, noticed Victor's distraction and frowned. "Victor, is everything all right?" she asked, touching his hand gently. "Yes," he replied quickly, his voice tense. "I just thought I saw someone I know." But Chloe wasn't satisfied with that answer. She followed his gaze to the counter where Elise was standing. "Who is she?" she asked, her curiosity evident. "It's just nobody," Victor said, trying to wrap things up. But inside, a whirlwind of emotions was consuming him. Who was the baby's father? How had Elise ended up here? She had nothing when they split up, and he, overcome with pride and resentment, had never looked back. Now, guilt was eating away at him. When Elise finally noticed Victor, it was like a punch in the gut for both of them. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and a mixture of shock and pain flashed across her face. But Elise quickly looked away, pretending not to have seen him as she continued working. Victor, however, could no longer concentrate. He stood up abruptly. "I need a moment," he said to Chloe. Without waiting for an answer, he made his way toward the counter, ignoring the curious looks around him. When he got close enough to call out to Elise, he saw the discomfort on her face. She tried to avoid him, but he was quick. "Elise," he said, his voice a mixture of authority and anguish. "Can we talk?" She stopped, but didn't look at him. "I'm working, Victor. This isn't the time to talk." "I don't care," he insisted, looking at her belly. "What's going on here? Are you—" Elise finally raised her eyes to him, and the fire in her gaze made him flinch for an instant. "That's none of your business," she replied coldly. "You've lost the right to ask anything about my life." Victor was about to retort when a customer called out to Elise, interrupting the tension between them. She took the opportunity to walk away, leaving Victor with a million questions and a growing anger. He returned to the table, but Chloe was already visibly irritated. "Are you going to tell me what's going on, or am I going to have to guess?" she said, crossing her arms. "It's nothing," Victor lied, but he knew that nothing could be further from the truth. Elise was pregnant, and somehow it affected him in a way he couldn't explain. As he and Chloe left the restaurant, Victor couldn't get the image of Elise out of his mind. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elise, alone and pregnant, struggling to survive. Deep down, he knew there was something more, something she was hiding. The weight of what he had ignored for months began to fall on him. But what Victor didn't know was that this encounter wasn't just a fluke. It was the start of something much bigger, something that would bring to light buried secrets, betrayals, and choices he could never undo. Next morning in Brussels. The next morning, Victor couldn't concentrate in the luxurious glass office of Desmet Technologies in Brussels. He stared out at the cityscape without really seeing anything. Reports and contracts were scattered across his desk, but the image of a pregnant Elise lingered in his mind. Elise cleaning tables insisted on occupying his thoughts. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Victor picked up the phone and dialed Liam, his best friend and personal lawyer. Liam had always been a voice of reason in Victor's life, someone who could balance his impulsive decisions with practical advice. When Liam answered, his voice carried a carefree tone, typical of someone who had just come from a tennis practice. Victor, what happened? You look tense. I need your help, began Victor hesitantly. It's about Elise. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Liam answered. What about her? You haven't spoken in months, right? Yes, but I saw her last night. She was working in a restaurant, and Liam, she's pregnant. The words came out of his mouth like a weight, but admitting them only increased the knot in his chest. Pregnant? That's serious. The surprise in Liam's voice was evident. Yes, and I need to know if the baby is mine, said Victor, his voice wavering. If it is, how could she keep it from me? Liam took a deep breath before answering. Victor, you know this isn't something she could hide forever. Maybe she tried to tell you, and you just weren't available. Guilt began to seep into Victor like a cold current. He knew Liam was right. After the divorce, he had completely closed himself off from Elise, blocking any attempt at communication. But even so, the idea of having a child he didn't know was something that made him furious and lost. Can you investigate for me? Find out how she is, where she's living, if she really has anyone in her life? Victor asked. Liam hesitated. Are you sure you want to open that door, Victor? It could bring up things you might not be prepared to deal with. I need to know, Liam. I can't ignore it, said Victor firmly. Meanwhile, Elise was trying to get on with her routine. Working in the restaurant wasn't exactly the future she had envisioned for herself, but it was what she had. Every step of her pregnancy was a silent battle. The baby was growing inside her, reminding her daily of everything she had lost, but also of everything she still had to protect. She knew that Victor's appearance that night wasn't just a fluke, and that made her uneasy. After finishing another exhausting shift, Elise sat down on a bench at the back of the restaurant. The night air was cold but refreshing after the heat of the kitchen. She stroked her belly with a mixture of affection and concern. The baby was everything to her now, but Victor's presence had awakened fears that she had been trying to suppress for months. Are you all right? Asked Amanda, a work colleague who had become her only friend. Amanda was a young woman with a generous heart, always willing to listen. Yes, just tired, replied Elise, forcing a smile. You're thinking about him, aren't you? Amanda asked sensitively. It's impossible to hide, Elise sighed, knowing that lying would be useless. That guy yesterday, it was Victor, my ex-husband. Amanda's eyes widened. The baby's father? Elise hesitated before answering. Yes, but he doesn't know, and I'd rather it stayed that way. Amanda frowned, clearly worried. Do you think he'll leave you alone after yesterday? Men like him don't accept being left in the dark when something like this happens. I know, admitted Elise, biting her lower lip, but I don't want him to be a part of it. He destroyed everything we had, and when I needed him, he turned his back on me. Amanda placed a comforting hand on Elise's shoulder. Maybe he's changed, but you need to protect yourself and the baby, above all else. The next day, Victor received a preliminary report from Liam, and it was brief but enough to make him even more uneasy. Elise was living in a small apartment in a modest area of the city, working two jobs to make ends meet. There was no record of a new relationship and no indication that anyone else could be the baby's father. Victor's blood boiled. He didn't know if it was guilt or anger, but the thought of Elise struggling alone while he thrived in his luxury bubble was unbearable. Unbearable. He decided he needed to confront her again, but this time, more clearly, he needed to hear from her directly what was going on. That evening, Victor went to the restaurant again. It was the end of her shift, and Elise was clearing one of the tables when she saw him approaching. Her eyes narrowed, and she shook her head, clearly irritated by his insistence. Victor, what are you doing here? Asked Elise, without disguising her tired tone. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice laden with urgency. Elise, this can't go on like this. I need to know the truth. The baby, is he mine? She was silent for a moment, looking directly at him. The tension between them was palpable. Finally, Elise answered with a firmness that took him by surprise. Even if it was yours, Victor, you don't deserve to be part of his life. You left me when I needed you most. Why should I trust you now? Victor felt as if he'd been hit. I've made mistakes, I know. But that doesn't mean I don't have the right to know if I have a child, Elise. You can't make this decision alone. She took a step forward, the pain evident on her face. I made this decision alone because you forced me to. You abandoned me, Victor. I couldn't count on you before, and I don't think I can count on you now. The conversation was interrupted by Amanda, who had come to collect Elise to finish an errand before leaving. Elise took one last look at Victor, a look that said more than words ever could. And at that moment, Victor realized that his son was truly his, and winning her trust again would be a tougher battle than he had imagined. Elise sat on a bench in the small courtyard behind the restaurant. The night was cold, and the air seemed to cut into her skin, but she didn't care. The work was over, and now all she wanted was a few minutes of silence before going back to her apartment. She ran her hand over her belly, feeling the baby's slight movements. A mixture of love and sadness flooded her. Amanda appeared, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. Here, you need this, she said, handing Elise one of the cups. Thanks, replied Elise with a weak smile. Amanda sat down next to her, clearly hesitating before speaking. Elise, I know it's hard, but you need to tell me what happened between you and Victor. Why are you so determined to keep him away? Elise looked at Amanda, her eyes filled with a pain that words couldn't fully capture. He broke me, Amanda, she whispered, and I don't know if I can let him back in even for the baby. She'd been holding it in for a long time. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was Amanda's gentle insistence. But for the first time, Elise felt she needed to get it off her chest. Victor and I met when I was at the height of my career, she began, her voice shaky but firm. I was one of the top marketing strategists at a multinational company. I loved what I did, and I was achieving things I had dreamed of for years. When I met Victor, he was charming, determined, and had big dreams. He said he wanted someone by his side to build a life with, and I believed him. She paused, her gaze lost in distant memories. After we got married, everything changed. Victor started to grow rapidly in the company, and suddenly he became this powerful man surrounded by important people. I was happy for him, but gradually I realized that my own life was taking a back seat. He asked me to leave my job to devote myself to our home, saying that I wouldn't need to work because he would take care of everything. Amanda frowned. You left your career for him? Elise nodded. Yes, I loved Victor, and at the time it made sense. But as the years went by, he started to change, and the business trips became more frequent. The dinners turned into endless meetings, and the nights spent with him became absences. When I tried to talk about going back to work, he would tell me it was unnecessary, that I should focus on supporting him. She took a deep breath of feeling the weight of the words that would follow. And then the betrayals began. Amanda was shocked. Betrayals? He, with other women, Elise replied, trying to keep her composure. At first, they were just suspicions. He was cold and distant when he was at home, always attached to his cell phone. But everything became clear when I found messages on his phone. He was talking to other women, planning trips, dates, while I stayed at home alone. He said terrible things about me, that I was finished, that I was a leech, that I did nothing but spend his money. He talked badly about my family, made fun of me with these women. Amanda's eyes filled with tears as she listened. My God, Elise, how could you stand it? I couldn't, admitted Elise, her voice breaking. One day, I confronted him. I said I knew about the betrayals and demanded respect, but he laughed it off. He said that I had no idea how the world worked, that he was the breadwinner, and that if I wasn't happy, the door was open. That was the moment I knew our marriage was over. Amanda held Elise's hand tightly. And you never thought of asking him for financial help after the divorce? Elise shook her head. I thought about it, but how could I? What he did to me destroyed me, Amanda. He left me with nothing, no job, no savings, and I found out I was pregnant weeks after we divorced. My family had always supported me, but I never liked burdening them. I needed to find a way to support myself. She looked at Amanda, her eyes shining with restrained tears. This job was the only thing I could do after being out of the market for so long. I've humbled myself, demeaned myself, but I've managed to get a place to live for my baby when he's born. And now Victor turns up out of the blue, pretending to care. He doesn't deserve to be part of this, Amanda. Not after everything he's done. Amanda hugged Elise, feeling the weight of the pain she was carrying. You're stronger than you think, Elise. But if he keeps insisting, maybe you need to stand up to him. For your baby's sake, you need to make sure he never has the power to hurt you again. Elise nodded, but the thought of facing Victor again seemed daunting. He was persuasive, powerful, and had a habit of manipulating the people around him. She knew she would need to be stronger than ever to protect herself and the baby from the past that insisted on resurfacing. That same evening, Victor was in his apartment looking at the report Liam had compiled on Elise. The idea that she was working as a waitress made him uneasy. He couldn't understand why Elise hadn't asked for his help. Even after the divorce, he had enough resources to ensure that she never had to work a single day. He thought about it, but I never stopped to reflect on how his words and actions had destroyed Elise's trust. He knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to confront her again. This time, he wouldn't accept excuses or evasions. He wanted the truth, and he wouldn't stop until he got it. Victor entered the restaurant for the third night in a row. He knew his insistence was pushing the limits, but he couldn't help himself. From the moment he had seen Elise in that simple uniform, struggling to survive, he had thought of nothing else. This time, he was determined to get answers. He would no longer accept her evasiveness. He needed to know why she hadn't come to him, why she had completely excluded him from something as important as her pregnancy. Elise saw him as soon as he walked in, and her stomach churned. She knew he wouldn't give up so easily, but his presence there once again made her feel a mixture of anger and exhaustion. She tried to avoid him, pretending she hadn't noticed him. But it was impossible to ignore the imposing figure of Victor walking toward her. Elise, he said, his voice low but full of determination. We need to talk. She stopped, holding the tray in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Victor, I told you, I can't do this. Not here. Not now. I'm not leaving without answers, he said, stepping closer. You can't keep avoiding me. I deserve to know why you chose to go through all this alone. Elise took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. If you keep insisting, you'll make me lose my job. This is all I have right now, Victor. Please, please leave before things get worse. Lose your job? Elise, you don't need that. I can look after you. I can look after the baby. Why didn't you ask for my help? He took a step forward, trying to touch her, but Elise stepped back. You don't understand, she said, her voice laden with pain. I didn't ask for your help because I don't trust you, Victor. Because you destroyed everything we had, everything I was. And now you think you can just show up and fix things with money. That's not how it works. Victor was about to reply when Amanda appeared, noticing the tension between the two. Elise, are you all right? Asked Amanda, casting a disapproving glance at Victor. Yes, replied Elise quickly, without taking her eyes off Victor. I'll be right there. Amanda, sensing the urgency, took Elise's arm and pulled her gently. Come on, there's a table waiting, she said, clearly making an excuse to get Elise away from the situation. Victor stood by, watching as Elise walked away. His frustration was evident, but he knew that pushing her further at that moment would only make things worse. He left the restaurant, his mind buzzing with questions, and stood outside, watching through the large glass window. Outside, he saw Elise going from one table to another, the forced smile on her face as she served the customers. She looked tired, but still had a determination he didn't recognize. It was an image that contrasted violently with his memories of her before. Elise had once been full of life, always with a sparkle in her eyes and ambitious ideas about the future. He had seen her as the perfect woman until he got tired of her perfection and started looking for excitement elsewhere. Victor leaned against the wall of the building, arms crossed, watching Elise as his mind took him back to the beginning of it all. He remembered the first time he saw her. Elise was a marketing strategist at a corporate event he was sponsoring. She was confident, articulate, and had an energy that immediately enchanted him. He fell in love quickly and intensely, and when they started dating, it seemed that nothing could keep them apart. Elise was the kind of woman who inspired those around her, and Victor felt lucky to have her by his side. Then came the wedding vows. He could still hear her words, spoken with tears in her eyes. I promise to be by your side in all times, good and bad, believing in the man you are and the man you can become. He wondered how he had let it all fall apart. As he watched Elise wipe down a table and smile at a customer, he felt something he hadn't felt for a long time: regret. He had underestimated her, treated her as if she were just another piece of his life, disposable when it was no longer convenient. But there, watching her work, he realized how strong she was. Elise was not the finished woman he mocked in his messages to his mistresses. She was a resilient woman, bravely facing the world while carrying a child he didn't even know existed. He thought of the women he had cheated on Elise with. They all seemed fascinated by his position, his money, his influence. They wanted parties, trips, and the glitter that came with his name. None of them really cared about who he was or his dreams. They weren't like Elise. None of them had sacrificed anything for him. And now he was beginning to wonder if all those betrayals had been worth anything. Back in the restaurant, Elise felt Victor's eyes on her without looking away. She knew he was there, watching. Amanda approached and said quietly, "He's still out there. Do you want me to call someone to get him out of here?" "No," replied Elise, shaking her head. "He'll leave eventually." Amanda put her hand on Elise's shoulder. "Are you okay? He's really bothering you." "I'll be fine," said Elise, trying to convince herself more than Amanda. "He's just trying to deal with the fact that he can't control everything." Victor stayed outside until Elise had finished her shift. He watched her leave the restaurant with Amanda by her side, the two of them talking quietly. He thought about approaching her again, but something inside him stopped him. For the first time, he realized that maybe Elise was right. Maybe he really didn't deserve to be a part of her life or her baby's life. As Elise disappeared into the night, Victor stood still, feeling the weight of his past actions. He knew he needed to change, but he didn't know if there was enough time to fix everything he had broken. Victor Carter's mansion was cold and silent despite its grandeur. The wide corridors and minimalist design seemed empty, reflecting the emotional state of the owner. He was sitting in his office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, but the drink didn't offer the comfort he was looking for. He had spent days mulling over his conversations with Elise, reliving memories of his marriage, and questioning decisions he considered irreversible. The sound of an approaching car brought him out of his reverie. It was Chloe. He knew he couldn't avoid that conversation any longer. Since they'd returned from the restaurant, he hadn't replied to her messages or answered her calls. He felt suffocated, unable to pretend that everything was normal while his mind was elsewhere. Chloe entered the mansion with firm steps. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but her face showed signs of frustration and worry. When she found Victor in the study, she crossed her arms and glared at him without hiding her irritation. "Victor, can you explain to me what's going on? Why have you disappeared? Why don't you answer me anymore?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of anger and hurt. Victor sighed, avoiding looking directly at her. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I've been distracted." "Distracted? Is that all you have to say?" she retorted. "You disappear for days, ignore me completely, and now you give me this lame excuse. What's really going on?" Victor hesitated. He knew Chloe was an intelligent woman, and lying to her wouldn't be easy. Even so, he tried to get around the situation. "I'm dealing with some personal things, things from the past. They have nothing to do with you." Chloe narrowed her eyes, assessing his answer. "It has to do with that woman in the restaurant, doesn't it? I saw the way you looked at her. Who is she, Victor?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question. Finally, he answered bluntly. She's my ex-wife, Elise." Chloe's eyes widened in surprise. "Your ex-wife? And you didn't think that was something important to tell me?" "It's not something I wanted to discuss," said Victor, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "Things between us ended a long time ago. I haven't seen or spoken to Elise in 6 months. She blocked me from everything. It has nothing to do with what we have now." "It has nothing to do with it?" Chloe let out a bitter laugh. "She's pregnant, Victor. I'm not blind. I saw her belly. That's your baby, isn't it?" That's why you're so stunned. Victor remained silent, and his hesitation was all Chloe needed to confirm her suspicions. She shook her head in disbelief. You knew, didn't you? Or are you trying to find out? Chloe accused, her voice sharp with anger. That explains it. You're pushing me away because you're obsessed with her, without even knowing if the baby is yours or if she already has another man in her life. Chloe, it's not that, said Victor, trying to calm her down. I still don't know if the baby is really mine, but if it is, I need to do the right thing. Do the right thing, Chloe snapped, her voice rising. So you disappear? You leave me with no answers. You don't answer my calls. Chloe took a step back, her hands shaking with anger. Are you telling me that now, after all this time, you've decided to be a responsible man? Where was that sense of duty when you betrayed her trust, or mine? The mention of betrayal was a direct hit. Victor tried to argue, but Chloe wasn't willing to listen. You're a selfish man, Victor, she continued. You discard people when they don't suit you, and now you're trying to fix something because your conscience is guilty. I'm sorry, but I don't want any part of it. She turned to leave, but Victor grabbed her by the arm. Chloe, please don't go. I need some time to think. I'm confused, and I don't know what to do. You're confused? She said, pulling her arm free. I'll make it easy for you. Stay with your confusion. I'm out of it. Chloe left the mansion, her footsteps echoing through the marble entrance. Victor stood alone in the study, feeling the emptiness expand around him. He knew Chloe was right. He was selfish, and his actions always revolved around what was most convenient for him. The next morning, Chloe made a decision. She needed to hear from Elise herself. She wanted to know the truth and understand why Victor was so affected. She decided to go back to the restaurant, dressed discreetly. Chloe entered the place, pretending to be just another customer. It didn't take her long to spot Elise, who was waiting on a table with a big belly and a tray in her hand. Chloe watched Victor's ex-wife for a few minutes. Elise looked exhausted, but there was a dignity in her posture that Chloe hadn't expected. Finally, she called out to her. You're Elise, right? Elise turned surprised. Yes, can I help you? My name is Chloe. I'm Victor's girlfriend, she said directly. Elise's face tensed, but she kept her composure. And what do you want from me? I want to understand, said Chloe. I want to know why he's so obsessed with you, and I want to confirm that the baby is really his. Elise hesitated, but her patience was at its limit. Yes, the baby is his, but that doesn't change anything. I don't want anything from Victor, and you can tell him that. Even ask him to stop looking for me here. Chloe was silent for a moment, assessing Elise. Finally, she said, I don't know how you've put up with so much. He used me just like he used you. And now, before Elise could reply, Chloe left. Shortly afterwards, she sent a message to Victor. I went to the restaurant and saw your ex-wife. She's pregnant with you. I can't believe you'd abandon a woman like that, especially pregnant. I can only imagine what she's been through. You throw people away as if they mean nothing. I don't want to see you anymore. I'm leaving town. I hope that one day you'll realize how destructive you are to everyone around you. Victor read Chloe's message sitting on the sofa in his mansion. Those words hit him like a punch in the gut. For the first time, he really began to reflect on who he was and how he treated people. He played with other people's feelings, always prioritizing his ego, his comfort, and his desires. Elise's face, struggling to survive while carrying his baby, wouldn't leave his mind. He remembered how she had abandoned everything for him, how he had betrayed and mocked her. Now, Chloe was right. He wanted to make things right, but only because he felt guilty. Victor put the phone away, his head between his hands. He needed to change, not for Elise, not for Chloe, but because he finally realized that he couldn't go on being the man he was. He was destroying everyone around him, including himself. The clock on the wall ticked almost midnight when Victor, lost in thought, finally picked up the phone and called Liam. He needed someone to listen to him, someone who could give him practical advice and perhaps help him see a way out of the chaos he himself had created. Liam answered on the third ring, his voice a little sleepy. Victor, is everything all right? It's late. I need you, Liam, said Victor, his voice hoarse with emotion. Can you come here? It's important. I'm not well. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Liam replied. All right, give me about 20 minutes. A short while later, Liam arrived at the mansion. He found Victor in the study, sitting in an armchair with a bottle of whiskey on the table next to him, but with an empty glass. The expression on Victor's face was one of sheer exhaustion, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Okay, Victor, I'm here. What's going on? Asked Liam, sitting down opposite his friend. Victor rubbed his hands over his face before answering. I'm broken, Liam. I think I always have been, but now everything is falling apart at once, and I don't know how to fix it. Liam leaned forward, attentive. Fix what? Be straight with me, Victor. You called me here for a reason. Talk. Victor took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Elise, pregnant, working in a restaurant, struggling to survive. I realized how terrible I'd been to her. I betrayed her, humiliated her, and abandoned her when she needed me most. And now, Chloe has left because she too has realized how selfish I am. Liam remained silent, letting Victor vent. I've become this person who plays with other people's feelings. I use people to make myself feel good, to inflate my ego. And when they're no longer convenient, I discard them. And the worst thing is, it doesn't make me happy. On the contrary, I just feel emptier. Well, said Liam after a moment's thought, the fact that you're acknowledging it is a big step. But acknowledging it isn't enough, Victor. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, Victor admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle. Every time I try to improve, I do something worse. How can I change who I am? How can I fix all this? Liam sighed and choosing his words carefully. Victor, change isn't something that happens overnight. It's a process, and it starts with honesty with yourself and with others. You need to admit your mistakes, and more importantly, you need to act to correct them. This doesn't mean that people will forgive you, but it does mean that you will start to become someone worthy of forgiveness. Victor was listening attentively to what Liam was saying. I've hurt her so much, he said finally. She doesn't trust me. How can I even try to make amends with her? How can I get close to someone I've hurt so much? She doesn't want to see me at all. Liam looked at Victor seriously. You start small. Don't try to fix everything at once because that will only seem forced and selfish. Show her with action that you're trying to change, not to make amends or assuage your guilt, but because you really want to be a better person. Victor shook his head, absorbing Liam's words. And Chloe, she left because she realized what kind of man I am. I think I used her. Chloe's an adult, Victor, said Liam firmly. She made the decision to leave because she saw something she didn't want in you. That's hard to accept, but maybe she did you a favor. Maybe you need this time alone to really reflect without distractions. Victor was silent for a long moment. Finally, he looked at Liam, his eyes tired, but with a spark of determination. The days following his conversation with Elise were a mixture of hope and self-evaluation for Victor. For the first time in years, he wasn't focused on million-dollar contracts or really the luxuries of his life, but on trying to become someone who wasn't defined by his selfishness and pride. He kept his distance from Elise, fulfilling his promise to respect her space, but continued to reflect on his words and actions. One night, while reading old emails and messages that he had ignored for years, Victor came across something that completely disarmed him. A letter that Elise had written at the height of their marital crisis. It was a letter she never gave him, but he found it among the divorce papers. The handwriting was unmistakable, and he began to read with a lump in his throat. The letter, Victor. I still remember the day we met, the way you looked at me as if I were the only person in the room. You made me feel like I could conquer the world, and for a while I believed it, but somewhere along the way we lost each other. Or maybe I lost you first. I tried so hard to be the perfect wife, to fit into your world, to support your dreams, but no matter what I did, it never seemed enough. You stopped seeing me, not as a partner, not even as a person. I became an accessory, something to show off when it suited you and discard when it didn't. When I found those messages on your phone, it broke me in ways I didn't think were possible. Not because of the betrayal itself, but because of what it said about us, about me. Did you ever really see me, or was I just another thing you could control? I'm writing this letter because I need to let go. I can't keep living like this, waiting for scraps of affection or validation from you. I deserve more than this. I deserve to be loved for who I am, not for what I can give you. If you're reading this, it means I finally had the courage to leave. Don't try to find me. I need to start over, to rediscover who I am without you. Maybe one day you'll understand why I had to do this. Until then, all I can say is, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, because I've stopped looking for mine in you. Goodbye, Victor. Elise. Victor sat frozen, the letter trembling in his hands. He had never imagined the depth of Elise's pain, or how much of it he had caused. Her words cut through him like a knife, forcing him to confront the reality of who he had been. For years he had blamed her for their failed marriage, convinced that she had given up on them too easily. But now, reading her unspoken truths, he realized how blind he had been. She hadn't walked away out of weakness. She had left because staying would have destroyed her completely. The weight of his guilt pressed down on him, heavier than ever before, but amidst the pain, there was clarity. If he wanted to change, if he wanted to be worthy of redemption, he needed to prove himself, not just to Elise, but to himself. Taking responsibility. The next morning, Victor called Liam again. I need your help, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I want to set up a trust fund for Elise and the baby. Something substantial, but discreet. I don't want her to feel obligated to accept it. I just want her to know that I'm taking responsibility. Liam hesitated. Are you sure about this, Victor? You know she might reject it outright. I know, Victor admitted. But it's not about her accepting it. It's about me doing the right thing. For once in my life, I want to act without expecting anything in return. Liam nodded. All right, I'll handle the paperwork. But tread carefully, Victor. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. A small step forward. Weeks passed, and Victor continued to honor his promise to stay out of Elise's way. But he couldn't stop thinking about her and the baby. He started attending therapy sessions regularly, working through the layers of guilt, shame, and regret that had shaped his life. Slowly, he began to understand why he had treated people the way he did, and how he could break the cycle. One afternoon, as he was leaving his therapist's office, he received a text from Elise. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at the same park. 3 p.m. Victor felt a surge of anxiety mixed with hope. He didn't know what she wanted to say, but he knew one thing: he owed it to her to listen. The next day, Victor arrived at the park early. This time, he didn't sit on the bench. Instead, he stood near the entrance, pacing nervously. When Elise arrived, she looked different, calmer, yet more guarded. Thank you for coming, she said as they stood facing each other. I wouldn't have missed it, Victor replied softly. Elise took a deep breath before speaking. I've thought a lot about what you said last time, about wanting to change for yourself, for the baby, and I believe you mean it. Victor's heart skipped a beat. But, she continued, her tone firm, actions speak louder than words. If you truly want to be part of this baby's life, you'll need to earn my trust. That means being consistent, respectful, and patient. No games, no manipulation. I understand, Victor said quickly. I'll do whatever it takes. Elise studied him for a long moment, searching his eyes for sincerity. Finally, she nodded. We'll take it one step at a time, she said, for the baby's sake. As they parted ways, Victor felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to become the man he always should have been. For Elise, it was a risk, a leap of faith she wasn't sure she was ready to take. But deep down, she knew that denying the baby a relationship with his father wouldn't be fair, not if Victor was genuinely trying to change. And so, together, they began the long journey toward healing. Not for themselves, but for the child, who deserved nothing less than two parents willing to grow, forgive, and love. Years passed, and their lives took an unexpected turn. The man once consumed by pride and selfishness, Victor, was genuinely transformed, showing that real change is possible when there is dedication. Victor and Elise rebuilt their relationship with patience and determination, overcoming hurts and healing wounds that had once seemed irreparable. Elise, who had previously carried the weight of so many disappointments, saw in Victor a rebirth. He became more than a companion. He became a partner in every sense, an example of empathy, commitment, and unconditional love. Little by little, she allowed the walls around her heart to come down, rediscovering the man who had once made her believe in shared dreams. Their son, Theo, named after Elise's father, who always believed in second chances, grew up surrounded by love. His father was his inspiration, present at every moment, from his first steps to his small daily triumphs. Sleepless nights, bedtime stories, and impromptu games in the backyard became part of a routine that Theo embraced with joy. One spring afternoon, Victor and Elise renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony, surrounded only by those closest to them. It wasn't about grandeur or spectacle. It was a celebration of their journey, of overcoming the past, and of building something stronger together. Theo, his eyes shining with pride, held the rings as the link to a new beginning, one built with mutual effort. As Victor slipped the ring onto Elise's finger, he whispered, "This time, I promise to never let you go." Elise smiled through her tears, replying, "And this time, I promise to trust again." The home they had created was full of laughter and learning. The lessons of the past became the foundation for a more solid relationship where respect and care guided every decision. Elise knew she had made the right choice by making room for change, while Victor never failed to show, day after day, that this second chance was the most valuable gift he had ever received. Their happiness wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet but powerful, built not on perfection but on love, redemption, and a deep understanding of what truly matters. Together, they wrote a new story, a testament to the fact that even the deepest wounds can heal when there is effort, repentance, and a willingness to start anew. Victor often reflected on how far they had come. From the man who had once discarded people like objects to someone who cherished his family above all else, he realized that true success wasn't measured by wealth or power, but by the love he gave and received. Elise, too, found peace. She no longer felt like she had sacrificed her dreams. Instead, she saw how her resilience had shaped her into the strong, compassionate woman she was today. And Theo? He grew up watching two people who loved each other deeply, proving that forgiveness and commitment could pave the way for an extraordinary future. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Timeland Stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional, heartwarming tale. Because sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most unforgettable love. Love doesn't always start perfectly, but the best ones always find a way.